can be very intimidating for, some people in the communities who are not used to or maybe divorced or removed from using a lot of these nutrient dense foods or produce within their daily meals. So we definitely try to support that by providing recipe cards and providing like instructions or providing small snippets of information on what this produce can be used for. Because I think, a lot of it again can be intimidating for customers who are just now seeing for the first time something like kohlrabi or something like Swiss chard and all of that, something that they're maybe not used to seeing in their everyday grocery stores. So not only bringing some of these like new vegetables or produce, but empowering people with information and knowledge to use that.
Hello, everyone. Today, I am talking with Joshua Hughes, who is the Fresh Moves Logistics Coordinator for the Fresh Moves Mobile Market, one of the many programs of the nonprofit Urban Growers Collective in Chicago. I'm excited to talk with Joshua about the Urban Growers Collective and their work in general, but more specifically about how the organization is working to close the food access gap. Expanding access to fresh quality food is something we've talked about before on this podcast, and it's something that I know motivates many farmers and organizations to think outside the box when it comes to marketing and distributing produce. Urban Growers Collective and the Fresh Moves Mobile Market represent some truly innovative thinking on the part of many people committed to evolving food systems. Joshua was raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. He graduated from Arizona State University with his BS in sociology in 2018. His community engagement experience stems from organizing creative and performance spaces for artists of color. As the manager of UGC's Fresh Moves Mobile Market, Joshua works to further assist the development of food security in Chicago as a continued action in social justice. Joshua has worked in food access with UGC since late 2019 through the height of the pandemic and emergency food distribution, which we should definitely talk about, Joshua. We didn't talk about that in our earlier questions, but I want to hear about that. He has helped lead the Fresh Moves Mobile Market to create new sustainable systems to better serve Chicago's South and West Side communities. Joshua, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Katie. I really appreciate the time.
So let's start with the big picture, shall we? For people who aren't familiar with the broader work of Urban Growers Collective, because our audience is all over the United States and Canada and beyond, can you share some about its overall mission, work, and projects in the community? I know it has a lot going on.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So Urban Growers Collective has many parts. The mission of the organization as a whole is to combat systematic racism and combat food injustice within the South and West sides of Chicago. We know a lot of the city development historically has been really based around redlining, segregation, and with that development, a lot of Black and brown communities in Chicago don't have access to nutrient-dense food. So with UGC, it's compartmentalized in growing, first and foremost, at our farms. We do provide education also through a lot of our youth corps programs, herbalist workshops, and then we have our food access program where we do farm stands, as well as we have our Fresh Moves Mobile Market bus, where we go around to different neighborhoods that have been categorized as food deserts, more correctly, neighborhoods that have been are affected by food apartheid, unfortunately. So yeah, we create that full ecosystem to help uplift these communities, bring nutrient-dense food, which all in all helps to create healthier lifestyles for people within these communities, give back resources and education around growing, and help build community with that.
Awesome. Yeah, and so there's farms within the city of Chicago that are part of Urban Growers Collective, right? I know that's not your area, but I just want to make sure our farmers out there understand, like, there's food growing in the city.
That is correct. Yeah, there are several farms throughout Chicago. We're not the only one. But Urban Growers Collective, their primary farm is in South Chicago, right at the end of Lakeshore, 91st and Mackinac area. And then there are also 6 other satellite farms. One of them is actually at Grant Park downtown, and a few others are at a few additional schools and healthcare centers within Chicago as well.
Excellent. And how did you find your way to working with UGC and the Fresh Moves Mobile Market? Like, what was your journey to food?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, as my bio said, I've originally been a part of like a lot of event coordinating, music and artist collaborations in Ohio, actually, and I was organizing for artists of color to have platforms to create and perform. And with that, giving back to the community and really trying to create space for rebuilding ourselves creatively, rebuilding ourselves, on a emotional level, giving us space to find ourselves and have comfort in things that, I'd say a lot of that space was taken from Black and Brown communities over time. I've lived in the Midwest my whole life. I moved to Chicago in 2019, actually. And I was actually looking for more fulfilling work, doing adjacent work to what I was doing when I lived in Ohio. And I was actually informed by a lot of my friends about the work of UGC. And I looked into the work that they were doing and was very interested in specifically the food access piece. So yeah, sent an application, had a lot of great interviews, and joined the team. And I found it very fulfilling these past 3.5 years working with UGC, doing this work and bridging that gap in communities where they don't have access to nutrient dense food. So yeah.
Yeah, I assume that our audience is familiar with terms like food desert and food apartheid. Can you break that down a little bit for people who maybe aren't as familiar or wouldn't necessarily know what that looks like because it hasn't been a part of their experience? Maybe they know statistically what it means, but they might not know what that feels like or what that's like for people living in these places.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, yeah, food apartheid was originally coined by Karen Washington, and that is essentially just the effects of systemic racism within the food system. So, we talked about redlining, we talked about a lot of the transportation disparity within communities for people to actually have access to getting nutrient dense food. So, you have a lot of neighborhoods categorized as food deserts who don't have grocery stores that have fresh produce, don't have nutrient dense produce, are not walkable neighborhoods, and are very strategically built out that way.
Mm-hmm.
So with this term, we're really encompassing food injustice through systemic racism and the effects that that's
Mm-hmm.
had.
Right. So people might still have access to food, but it might be limited to more like prepared food products, preserved foods, high sugar, what
Exactly.
we would call junk food, probably.
Yeah, corner stores, selling liquor and junk food,
Cigarettes.
or yeah, or having grocery stores that simply just have rotting produce on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that comes into it.
Okay. So Fresh Moves Mobile Market is directly trying to answer that question, right? What are its
Correct.
specific goals?
Yeah, so our goal is to bring produce sourced primarily from our farm. So a lot of our greens, peppers, eggplants. We have an abundance of herbs that come from those gardens, and bring those into the communities that we're in. So our main farm is in South Chicago. We currently have 3 sites in South Chicago. So we want to make sure that we're bridging the gap of the work that we're doing and the bringing education with the produce that we're selling to these communities that we're occupying, and also reaching further into the south and west side neighborhoods of Chicago. So yeah, Fresh Moves also aims to, boost the local economy within the communities as well. So we're not just bringing produce from our farm, but we're also bringing products from local businesses. Specifically, we try to work with Black and Brown owned businesses within the community. So we've worked with Einem Soap. We've also worked with Chicago French Press, Fresher Together at the Bread Club. We've also worked with Bungalow Bread, and we work with Urban Eden, who was actually one of the farming apprentices who graduated through that program with UGC and does hydroponic farming. So he makes microgreens and mixed salads, and we sell that on our bus. So, really, trying to build a full ecosystem and a full, economic push for the operations that we're doing with the communities that we're working with.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe what it actually looks like for our listening audience? I have been all over your website and on your Instagram. So I know we're talking about a really cool bus, right? That goes out into neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe, what is that like to get on there? It's a little mobile shop, or do you set up a booth, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So, I think a lot of people, maybe even before my time, are familiar with us having a CTA bus that was retrofitted into a grocery store. We now have a shuttle bus. So if you can imagine, a shuttle bus at an airport or at a hotel, it's a little smaller, a little more condensed, but very easy to stock, very mechanically reliable. But what we do is typically on our summer and spring warm days, we have customers enter through the rear of the bus, and we have usually our brochures, welcoming signs, recipe cards on the entrance tables. We have a refrigerator in there, which is where we stock a lot of our herbs, butter, and mixed salads as well. And walking through the bus on the left, you will have most of our fruits, citrus, and on the right, you'll have our leafy greens and root vegetables. So we definitely try to, have little education pamphlets and information along with the produce that we're giving out, especially the produce that is directly sourced from our farm, just to really, encourage and empower people to shop and also actually use these ingredients within their recipes. I think that it can be very intimidating for, some people in the communities who are not used to or maybe divorced or removed from using a lot of these nutrient dense foods or produce within their daily meals. So we definitely try to support that by providing recipe cards and providing like instructions or providing small snippets of information on what this produce can be used for. Because I think, a lot of it, again, can be intimidating for customers who are just now seeing for the first time something like kohlrabi or something like, Swiss chard and all of that, something that they're maybe not used to seeing in their everyday grocery stores. So not only bringing some of these like new produce, new vegetables or produce, but, empowering people with information and knowledge to use that.
Right. So Chicago's a big place. Do you go out every day in the main growing season, or twice a day to different neighborhoods? And how fast, what is the response like? How fast do you sell out? Where do you park? I'm like trying to picture, having been to farmers markets, it's like a little mobile farmers market. And do you tell people ahead of time? How does this work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all great questions. Well, I'll start with, so we have a 5 day a week, Monday through Friday
Okay.
operation. We go to 3 stops per
Okay.
day. And we have a full operational schedule. We have that on our website, urbangrowerscollective.org, under Fresh Moves. We pass out these flyers physically as well. And we station ourselves with several different of our partner sites through our organization. And our sites are chosen pretty strategically, actually, because a lot of, the transportation issues, or, gaps with a lot of these neighborhoods that aren't walkable, we want to make sure that we're capturing as many people as we can. So we typically strategically place ourselves at health centers, churches and schools because that's where a lot of people are congregating at once. And that's also a place where a lot of transit is going to bring people in those areas more consistently. So yeah, we run from a pretty much a 10 to 4 schedule. We are docked at our 3 stops per day for about 60 to 90 minutes. And yeah, depending on the time of year, I mean, really influences our business. Obviously, spring and summer are typically our busiest, being a farmer's market. Depending on what neighborhood we're in, really determines what produce is going to sell out more. A lot of we try to stock and be culturally sensitive to what people are typically shopping for. We also take customer requests a lot of the time and try to take survey and assess like what people are wanting. So a lot of that comes from surveying and collecting that data and just really observing how people are shopping, adding things that people want, and taking out things that people don't want, typically depending on the day. So our stock can look different from day to day depending on what neighborhoods we're in. But yeah, we occupy again, primarily south and west side neighborhoods, most of them being on the south side currently. But we're currently stationed at Academy of Global Citizenship, which is in the Archer Heights area, and that's actually a site where we're going to be doing programming out of and adding hoop houses from UGC and doing education for students there. So trying to really, again, build out more of the educational ecosystem with all of our programming that goes on between Fresh Moves and UGC with our partner sites. We're also located in Bronzeville, in Boxville, as well as King Center. We're in Inglewood as well, our own alliance currently, as well as Howard Brown Health on 63rd. And then our South Chicago area, we're at Claretian Associates. We're at Chicago Family Health Center and Catherine Drexel Church. So yeah, we try to, branch out as much as we can. Oh, in our West Side neighborhoods, we're actually over at Trina de Villa, South, or Thresholds, Austin, as well as Stone Temple currently. So yeah, we try to, have the biggest impact that we can within the areas that we're at with one bus, within a working day, which we've made, a lot of stride and progress for the past 3 years that I've been there, really, working to, again, like be consistent, and gain the trust of the communities that we're in, and respond to people's needs as communicated. It's a never-ending process of like problem solving through that. But I'm really proud of, how the team has adjusted and how the org and myself have adjusted to meeting those needs and responding effectively.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really getting out there. 3 stops a day, 5 days a week. Do you restock in between those, or do you start the day full and end the day?
We restock through the day. So yeah, we start with the full load from our storage in the morning. And then we actually we have our bus and then we have a refrigerated truck that we bring with us. So we rotate out produce, especially our greens, so that they don't wilt throughout the day. And we restock from that as needed.
Okay, that makes sense. I was trying to picture how you get a whole day's worth of greens in a bus, but that makes a lot of sense. So what has the response been like? I know you said that you're trying to really respond to what's really useful to the communities themselves. What kind of responses have you had? Do you have customers who come every single week, who are regulars? What does it look like at this point?
Yeah. Well, so we've had a really strong response, especially through the pandemic, and doing our COVID relief. I know a lot of organizations were getting funding to do, food access and to distribute food So a lot of the produce that we distributed in our earlier years were we were giving out a lot of free produce with that funding. So, in that time frame in the past 3 years, we were seeing upwards to 30,000 customers in a year,
Mm-hmm.
which is huge for just a small bus
Mm-hmm.
going to only this many stops. So you can imagine how
Yeah.
busy it was at that time. And obviously, at the height of the pandemic and even for a long time after, the lockdowns and all of that, we, we received a lot of like thanks, a lot of gratitude. We've maintained a lot of regulars even post that sort of funding and moving into just a farmers market retail operation. We do see customers regularly every week at all of our stops. And we've seen a lot of people, bringing their families, sharing the word and bringing more people out. So yeah, we've had a lot of positive response to that, and I'm really proud of what the consistency of the program has been able to provide for the customers that we serve. I think that there, notoriously or like historically have been a lot of programs like this that, are only able to function for a certain amount of time and then they disappear. And communities are very used to that happening, I think. And so, coming into, you know, this type of operation, a lot of people are skeptical, expecting this to disappear. But the goal is to keep this running and to keep, providing this service for communities that need it, along with supporting our local farmers in the process and our local vendors and businesses in between. So, yeah, it's been a really really positive response. A lot of very hard work and like strategic
Mm-hmm.
planning behind it. A lot of trial and error as well. But I think that the impact is very clear. So, in this past 3.5 years of with myself being in this sort of work, I'm very proud to see that.
I imagine so. And you came on board in 2019. How long was the program in operation before you came on board?
Oh yeah, so actually I came in on late 2020 actually, so August 2020.
Okay, to this. Okay, to this program.
Yeah. And yeah, the program had been running off and on, I believe, since 2014. And I know in that time, again, they were using a retrofitted CTA bus. And even before that, I believe there was a retrofitted school bus that they were using. So the program had been running under a different organization, I think, in between. But the consistency of the program has changed significantly since getting a new bus and having this funding to go with it. So it's really a testimony to having that support and consistency.
Yeah, you were alluding to earlier the possibility that those older bus types were maybe mechanically challenging. Is that something the program had to contend with? Is just the basic like breakdowns of vehicles?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah,
I think that's something farmers can relate to.
yeah. And I actually being at the Mobile Market Summit in 2021, I definitely heard a lot of stories
Mm.
about, some people were doing a similar operation. A lot of it is the mechanical issues and having that consistency with a program. I mean, that is going to get in the way. With the CTA bus specifically, the driver has to have a CDL, you know, be certified and, trained in driving. So that's a very specific, candidate. With the shuttle bus that we have now, we don't need that, and it's much easier to drive. So I know even that piece of it has helped us to have a lot more consistency.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know just thinking about those types of vehicles and what they require to keep operating, and you think about like an actual transit authority or a delivery service, they have a whole fleet and they probably have a person or multiple people whose jobs are just to keep that fleet running. And then farmers or folks like you who are trying to distribute food in this innovative way are just buying like one vehicle. and don't necessarily have the
Yeah,
whole infrastructure to support it in the same way. And yeah, when you're
yeah,
using a vehicle like that every day, I mean, it's going to need work. And so I can see how that's definitely a big and probably at times expensive piece of the puzzle.
most definitely. I can only imagine, like, I've heard many stories before my time, but, being in the heat of, those mechanical issues and figuring out those things logistically,
Yeah,
is challenging.
I, I'm sure. So you came on mid pandemic, it sounds like. And it sounds like in that time,
Correct.
the program was able to access some funds to make the food even more affordable or at times completely free to the communities. Okay. What's the status now as far as what you're able to charge to the communities between pulling from your own farms, and the whole organization's a nonprofit, so I assume there's some level of support through different foundations or donors. What How does that help you make the food even more accessible at this point?
Yeah. So, yeah, the funding as of right now, I mean, it has changed, as has a lot with a lot of organizations post pandemic. But yeah, the funding right now, to my knowledge, is keeping the program going, keeping us able to buy from our farm as well as other local vendors here in Chicago. We try to be price conscious with the produce and the food that we're selling. So we try to keep our prices flush or lower than a lot of the grocery stores around us, just to keep this, you know, appealing, and accessible to the customers that we have. And we also try to provide the education that, if you're seeing, some produce that is some of the leafy greens that may be a little more expensive, like knowing that it's supporting local farmers as well, which I think is a key piece too. And we've seen a lot of our customers being willing to, still come out, still access us and spend and support, that initiative as well. I know another big piece that this program has offered that we've surveyed through the years is that this particular operation is very good for our elderly customers who have trouble
Mm-hmm.
walking, who have difficult with
Yeah.
accessing, grocery stores, simply because of the
Mm-hmm.
traffic. A lot of customers that are in wheelchairs or have canes or crutches don't want to be in a crowded grocery store, so they prefer coming to us to have a less crowded experience. We also, provide assistance with shopping. We very much get specific with what people want. We bring it out to them. We carry it to their cars. If their house is close, sometimes we'll even walk it over to their house, which some customers live literally, next door to our program. So, I think that, full circle, this initiative has been really impactful.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the special access needs that different populations have. I think this is something that doesn't always get talked about or thought about in terms of food access, but I know that just in our experience as farmers, we had customers who we had like a subscription style program, um, came to us specifically because we had set up a distribution site that was very physically comfortable. We had rented a storefront and we had benches. It was heated. It was air
Mm,
conditioned. And I know it was a pretty sweet deal. There's a whole backstory of how we got that sweet deal. It was tiny, but it was nice. But what we heard from people was that, these were populations of people who had the money and the interest in going to farmers markets, but maybe literally couldn't safely walk through a farmers market. Right. And so they knew they could walk to our storefront and that they knew there was a bench once they got there. And then we always were able to help them. So I think that's what you're sharing as an experience with just having a different model, a different set of factors. You can reach whole different populations potentially with food. And it's really cool to hear that people are feeling like this is a safe place where they know that they can ask for help, and it's not going to be like a fast-paced, crowded environment. Those are awesome little details that can make such a big difference for people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's true. Yeah, a lot of a lot of farmers markets traditionally, I think they're typically like catered to like a more well-funded clientele. And so yeah, that's where our program differs too. We're not trying to make a bunch of money off of this. It's really about the impact and the access, and the education that comes with
Mm-hmm.
this.
And I don't want to throw farmers markets under the bus. They're doing some awesome things out there too around accessibility with,
Oh, absolutely.
taking WIC checks and things too. There's a lot of good stuff happening there too. But I think the point stands that if, as people who care about food systems, we need to remember that there's never going to be a one size fits all solution, that just thinking about slightly different ways of getting food to people, we can reach more and more populations of people. So this is an excellent example. I had a farm on a couple of weeks ago who food access is a really high priority to them too. And so they've made it work to sell to school districts. And they've done a lot of things to make that work. So again, reaching a whole different population through that, which is awesome. It gets me excited about the future.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of great work like on so many different levels. Again, yeah, with all types of different farmers markets, especially with the WIC programs and Link Up Illinois Experimental Station, who we
Mm-hmm.
work with, who provides funding to us to do link and link match transactions, which stretches their dollar. And I know that a lot of other farmers markets do that programming as
Mm-hmm.
well. So yeah, it's a collective community, and it's really all hands on deck in figuring out how to get
Mm-hmm.
food to these communities in different ways and being creative about it.
Yes. So let's talk about some of the challenges of that. I imagine that once in past the mechanical ones, which we talked about, the
Hmm.
literal keeping the bus going every day. What are some of the unique challenges that UGC folks have encountered with both growing food and then also distributing food in an urban setting, or perhaps Chicago specifically?
Yeah, again, this organization has existed, long before my time here, but I can speak on, urban agriculture in general. I know that there can be a lot of issues, with zoning and acquiring land, and then even, doing the soil testing and making sure your soil isn't contaminated and safe to grow on. And, if it isn't, making sure that you're filtering out your soil and changing out your soil to make sure that it's healthy to grow in. So there's a lot of, political, and city, permits that can be challenging for people. Acquiring land is not easy to do, especially in a big city like Chicago. I'm very impressed with, what the org has been able to acquire and facilitate. But I think that, that is a big one. A lot of people with urban agriculture, have to really, start in their backyard if they have one,
Right.
start in their flower pot in their apartments, and really, I think making sure that like that initiative is being shared with folks in the city. Like, this is happening in the city. There are programs that are doing farming, and this is where you can have access to land. This is where you can rent out a plot to start your own farming projects, grow your own crops. You can also get educated on, how to grow certain herbs and produce. And really sharing that access with folks in the city. I think that I think it's a given that maybe I shouldn't assume because I don't live in a rural area, but I think many would assume that farming is more accessible in rural areas. And a lot of people are just like, there's no way I can do any sort of farming in the city. But, it is coming up more and more. It's highly much in development right now all over the country. And I think that, yeah, acquiring the land, sharing with the communities and getting the information to the communities and getting the financial support and continuing to invest in urban agriculture and local farmers, specifically in urban agriculture. But yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and I'm thinking about the bus Fresh Moves Mobile Market program. I mean, in theory, this bus could operate and deliver fresh produce that is grown in nearby rural areas. So it seems like the UGC has identified that it's not just important to get food to people, but it's also important to get people to the food. Right. Right. So that's part of this bigger picture of the whole program, is seeing value in not just the consuming of it, but giving people the opportunities to engage with the growing process as well.
Exactly.
I mean, as a farmer, I think, yeah, of course it's valuable. But you're right. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
in an
what
urban
is
setting,
it?
that's not a given that people will have that part of the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, like, I think that, we get a lot of customers that are just walking up on our bus for the first time and they're just like, I had no idea this existed.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you? So I can never assume that it is widely known that, there are farms in Chicago, or that, there is a program like this, or that, there are programs that will teach you how to grow and how to identify herbs and, have access to potentially your own plot as well. So the education, and the outreach is really important with all this.
And what is the relationship then between the mobile market and the farms? You're buying produce from them. Are you also giving them feedback? You said that you receive feedback from your customers and the community about what kinds of things. Do you
Mm.
guys talk about that? Help plan out what they're going to grow? And also, are they selling to anywhere else besides the mobile market?
Yeah. So, well, the relationship with the bus really is to transport produce out into the communities. So we do work directly with the farms and communicating, what is selling well, what isn't selling so well, what we could maybe use more of or less of within the year, what season, is best to grow this specific produce. So yeah, that's been a working piece for the past few years. It took a lot of like observing, surveying, and adjusting, growing practices and communication through that. And what was your other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was curious if they distribute produce anywhere else besides the bus, or is it primarily a closed system within UGC?
So, yeah, no, UGC provides produce to several restaurants I know within the community. I know that they've distributed through other like food distributors as well. So yeah, they have a number of different connections where they distribute produce out to as well, especially in the summertime.
When there's a lot of food.
Yeah, a lot of blossoming food, a lot of activity around food access, and people, being more energized to get out there.
I am curious what kinds of vegetables have been favorites or requested by the community who comes to the bus regularly.
Most definitely. So, I mean, I think our number one sellers are the farm carrots that we have, along with our farm collards and kale. And for the peppers, I'd say, from what I've observed, a lot of people really love our bell peppers and habaneros and our cilantro.
I mean, I like all those things, but you could have listed almost any vegetable and I would have said, yeah, good choices. Oh, carrots. I think those are the favorite of every every farm customer ever.
most definitely.
Obviously, the big foundational mission is again about food access. And these are some of the specific ways that UGC is working on this between the farms and the bus. Um, I'm curious if you have any thoughts after your time working with UGC about kind of the broader picture, what farmers in general could be doing to close to food access in their own communities.
Yeah. I mean, I think there have been a lot of like, creative ways in thinking about that. And again, I'm not a farmer, but I definitely, imagine, really sharing, information about what your farm is like growing, what they're providing, and connecting with the communities, the surrounding communities about the desires of how to utilize and access the food that's growing on the land. I think that, what we do is, very much, an ecosystem of different operations around how to get food out to people. And I think that, that has really blossomed over time. It can take a lot of time to spread the word about farming, especially, I'm speaking more of like in an urban
Mm-hmm.
setting. But, really, reaching out to the community, creating open space to talk about how to utilize the land and what is growing and how that can be shared with the surrounding communities.
I'm curious if a farm was interested in pursuing some similar model where they're actually, rather than just going to a predetermined spot that's already an established market. Have you had any experience in your work with establishing the relationships for your host sites? And what was that process like for you?
Yeah. So there have been a couple sites within the years that I've worked here that I had to be like the face of establishing that relationship. And it's all been really, honestly, very well received. Beyond the sites that we've been stationed at, we've had a lot of requests to be, stationed at other sites, churches, healthcare centers, different businesses. So there's a lot of desire for that. So I think the communication around that has been, really well received. And, observing and like communicating all of that, I've really just been focused on, well, how will this be
Mm-hmm.
supported
Mm-hmm.
when it's actually activated? So, I'm really looking for, coordinator support, really, being highly active in what we're doing, making sure that it's a secure spot where, safety is first and foremost being mindful of, really making sure that, the sites and coordinators are engaging with the community, telling them about the service that we're providing and sharing that information so that we're having the best impact that we can through what we do, and just making sure that it's a fruitful relationship for us in the community, and we're not just taking up space that isn't actually engaged with. But yeah, all of these established relationships that myself and the org have created through the years have been very well received. I mean, we're just one bus, and we realize that we only have a certain capacity with just one bus to to serve X amount of sites within a week. So there's initiative and talk about there wanting to be more buses like ours within the community, so we can have a deeper reach and a further impact with what we do.
And you had mentioned that one of the challenges of being in an urban setting, at least on the growing side, is legal questions, permits, and things. On the distribution side, has there been anything of that sort that, like, is it just, I don't know, in Chicago, can you just go and park a bus in a private parking lot and sell food? Or um, is it, where does it fall into categories as far as I don't even know where to begin because every municipality has such different regulations.
Yeah, I'm not super well versed in like the legalities of all of it. I mean, again, because this a lot of this
Mm-hmm.
was established before I was around. But yeah, I mean, there are zoning laws and permits you have to be stationed anywhere, and that's why we're not just pulling up to some random lot to sell our food. We're directly partnered with other organizations to make sure that we're legally in compliance with where we're stationed, and that we have all the support we need in doing our operations. So
Yeah, no, I mean, even if you'd given really specific answers to my listening audience, this is an area you would, if you wanted to do some model like this, you would need to do your own due diligence because the reality is that it's going to vary so much from city to city, um, just even based on the zoning or whatnot.
exactly, I imagine it's looser in some places, but Chicago, land is tight here.
Yeah, I would imagine that if you're in the bigger cities, Bay Area, Chicago, Seattle, New York, you're going to have a lot of layers of stuff to sort through, bringing a little mobile shop around, and so, which is perhaps one of those barriers that just adds to the layers of access issues for people. If it's really challenging to set up an operation that might be offering a solution, then then that's a barrier for some people to do it. So, um, yeah, hopefully there's people with enthusiasm and patience and tenacity, like UGC clearly has with all of its committed people involved over the years, to keep working through these challenges as they come up. So I know that you personally were really inspired to get into this work because of, it sounds like, a commitment to social justice issues. Having done this work now for a couple of years, how has that evolved your understanding of the connections between agriculture, food systems, and social justice today, and kind of where we're going in the US and society? Big questions. No big deal. Sorry, I
Yeah.
just realized, like,
Oh.
give me your thesis. No pressure. I'm really
Yeah.
asking you as a human, just as a person, not necessarily as, a guru, but I am curious of how this work has shaped you and your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Doing different sorts of like organizing or social justice work. I think that I don't know that I was aware of how political even food was when I was younger, and how this is going to be in the future. I'd say an even greater need within cities. Um, a lot of us, especially in marginalized communities, have been separated and divorced or had a lot of the land and like practices taken from us as far as growing, and being familiar with, food of our ancestors, food of our culture. And I see the the duality of like the innovations of cities and all of that, but also an increased disparity that can happen if we're not having these conversations and really organizing and creating movements around food justice. In the wake of capitalism. So I definitely see, the depth of the importance of this kind of work, not only from, economic level or even a household level, but even on a spiritual level. Food is, emotional. It's something we need every day. It's what, we're made of at the end of the day in a lot of ways. So I think it's, this type of work has really, deepened my understanding and opened my eyes to the increased need and importance of educating people around food justice, and providing support, creating funding, supporting local farmers, and really, really, supporting both rural and urban agriculture as a whole, on a local level.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, it is also connected and so important. I was just thinking about the importance of the urban agriculture too, in terms of looking to the future and food security for our whole country, and how, we always talk about everybody, the often cited statistics about how the average age of the American farmer is going up, right? And there's fewer of them every year. And just thinking about how at the same time, more and more people are living in urban and suburban settings. So if we are going to have more farmers in the future, they might not come from rural areas initially, right? So to have these
Exactly.
resources, not just so that eaters can be connected to the source of their food, which I think is profoundly important, but also to find the next generation of farmers, right? They might not be growing
Absolutely.
up on a farm right now.
I believe that
Mm-hmm.
100%. I hear more and more about people who, have left their corporate jobs or, their political jobs even to do this kind of work, and how, that is a preference, that feels more fulfilling. That is the work that they feel aligned with, and they didn't even know it, for a long time, or didn't know how deep it was. So yeah, it's powerful to see that. And it's true. I think we will definitely continue to see more farmers who are, from big cities, from New York,
I literally interviewed a
Chicago.
flower farmer a couple weeks ago who was living in New York City before she and her husband started a farm in New Jersey.
Hmm.
So, yeah, but we need it there so that people can, just on a fundamental level, know how it works. We should, it feels like a basic human thing to know where food comes from. Um, but then also to get the people who might have that affinity for the bigger work connected to it. Yeah, it seems really important. Thank you so much, Joshua, for sharing with us today. I'm very inspired. Our audience is primarily market farmers who are probably one thing that's consistent about our audience for our magazine and the podcast is they're people who like to try new things and think about how to market differently. So I am curious if there's anything else you'd like to share with the audience, just knowing who's listening and probably feeling inspired right now too.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage, anyone who's listening, running markets, or a farmer, continue the good work. It is, hard. It takes a lot of resilience in doing it. I know a lot of us are probably tired of hearing that, but it is playing the long game and developing, sustainable food systems. I'd say all over. It's not just urban, but rural as well on a local level. Um, you know, Include your communities in what you do. Be very intentional about the information that you're sharing and the education that you're sharing around it. Food, is a human right, and we have to treat it as such. So we don't need to gatekeep these practices. It needs to be shared with people so that this work can continue beyond us, for future generations. So yeah, thank you for everything that you're all doing out there, all over the U.S. and all over the world. Um, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joshua. How can people find and connect with Urban Growers Collective and the Fresh Moves mobile market if they want to find out more or even maybe support the work?
Yeah, so we have our website, urbangrowerscollective.org. We are also on Instagram, so Urban Growers Collective on Instagram. And Fresh Moves also has an account, Fresh Moves Chi, CHI, where you can follow us and get updates on there. We also work with the Community Food Navigator as well, so they distribute a lot of knowledge and community information on food access within Chicago as well. That includes us. So, yeah, I think that's our channels at the moment.
Excellent. Okay, well, check them out if you're interested in learning more. Thank you so much, Joshua. I hope you guys have a great season.
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate your time.